Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Brian Jester, co-founder here at Occupy Fantasy. In week 15, I got third place in the DraftKings Millionaire Maker for a cool $50,000. And Jack, the architect of our Occupy Fantasy lineup builder, got first place on the FanDuel two-game slate on Saturday for $58,000. So that's more than $100,000 in Occupy winnings just over the last couple of days. So what you're about to watch is a replay of our Tuesday night Twitch stream, the $1 Million Mission, where I usually review my previous week's 150 NFL DFS lineups for FanDuel and DraftKings, and we discuss high-level tournament lineup building strategy. In this episode, though, we brought Jack on, and it was actually about 45 minutes of just high-level discussion and taking your questions about our lineups. Now, we talked about stacking for both these short slates, like Jack won, and the main slates, like I won. Talked about player pool selection, talked about figuring out which contest to actually play. And then in Jack's case, we talked about late swapping, which is a very underrated aspect, especially on these smaller slates, of helping Jack take down the prize because he made 3 crucial late swaps to help get him to this 173-point score to win the 58K. So I think this episode will be beneficial no matter if you watch it just a couple of days after it airs or if you're watching this 6 months from the time of these wins, because the content is evergreen and the strategies can be used not only for any NFL DFS slate, but probably for any sport, any DFS slate. So I think you'll really enjoy this. Sit back, take some notes, and hope you learned something.
What's going on, everybody? It is Moose, Brian, and Jack from DFS Magic. What's going on, everybody? It is, again, Moose, Brian, and Jack from Occupying DFS Magic here for the Week 15 of the $1 Million Mission. Thank you, Kim, for the subscriptions. It's been subscribed for 9 months. Awesome. Thank you. So we'll start off with you, Jack. How's it going, man?
Hey, Moose, good, man. Really good. Just coming off the last win here. And, just excited to be here. And obviously excited to talk about Brian's big win, too.
Absolutely, yeah. We got a double winner from Jack and another win from Brian. What's up, man? How's it going?
What's up, Moose? Feeling good. We got a crazy week this week with Christmas and all the different kind of slates we got going. We have single game on Christmas, 3 games right after, main slate on Sunday, season's winding down. So all good stuff, and it was nice to get a big victory before the season was over.
Absolutely, yeah. And so we're here for the Week 15 edition of the $1 Million Mission. And real quick, Brian, just a couple words or sentences. What is the $1 Million Mission for the people who don't know, or if you're watching this on YouTube or anything like that?
Yeah, so if you've never seen this before, we do this generally Tuesdays, depending on if there's a COVID rescheduled game or not. But every Tuesday night, we review my previous week's 150 lineups from FanDuel and DraftKings. We have transparency and look at my ROI, my wins and losses. If I lose, we still talk about my lineups. We look at my exposures to different players, the stacks I chose, talk about any high-level DFS strategy for tournament building lineups. We look at what other top pros did, what other winning lineups did. And really, it's a learning session for us. And we do put these back on YouTube, and we have every single video archived, because when people ask us, how do I learn to mass enter tournaments, or even how do I build high-risk lineups for NFL DFS, we refer them to these videos because we just have crazy amounts of discussion in all of them. And although it's not the who do I play this week type of video, these are the types of videos that really help people long-term become winning DFS players.
Absolutely, yeah. And it's better to where it's not like a Saturday stream where it's, do I play this player or this player? We can sit down on a Tuesday, we're here for 30 minutes or so, and instead of saying which player, it's, okay, what type of stack should I be running? How should I be playing my contest? Stuff like that. So I want to bring in Jack here. Jack, you had a little victory. I'm going to go ahead and show your screenshot if I can figure out how to get this on properly. If you want to talk about it here. First place for a little over 58K.
So it was a sweet win, another short slate for me. And, I would just start off by saying, echoing what you guys were just talking about, which is, it's not about like, who should I play this week? I mean, as you can see from the lineup, there's not any super low-owned players on that list. And frankly, it looks like a pretty chalky lineup, but it's exactly what you said. It's the type of stack that I played. And then we'll get into the game theory of it later, which was the late swap. But yeah, just to echo what you guys said, it's a lot more than just, which player do I pick this week.
Yeah, absolutely. Brian, do you have any comment about this lineup? I know neither of us are particularly that good. It's short slate. Jack's a short slate goat. But do you have any comments about the lineup or anything like that you want to say?
Yeah, after we look at my stuff, we'll come back to this lineup and talk about short game slate strategy, because we do have the 3-gamer on Saturday that I think a lot of the concepts can apply to. But I just gotta say, like, Jack is it's ridiculous, dude. So in the past year and a half, he's won a single game slate on FanDuel. That's one game for those who don't know how to count. He's won a 2-game slate. This one won the 3-game Thanksgiving slate last year, and then his big win to start everything in the playoffs in 2019 won the 4-game. I think it was the wild card slate. So clearly knows what the hell he's doing on these short slates, and I can't wait to pick his brain later.
Yeah, absolutely. Perfect. So we'll go ahead and we'll jump over to see what Brian has done. Again, full transparency. We take a look at how he did on FanDuel, Week 15 FanDuel. This includes, Brian, your WFFC fan satellite tickets, entry costs, all that other stuff as well. So 93.90 in entries, a little over 5.9K in winnings for a minus 36% ROI.
Yeah, pretty disappointing. Yeah, pretty disappointing, honestly, though, because I'd spent a little over 8K in WFFC Fan Championship satellites, got 15K in tickets, so almost doubled my money in tickets, and then had a disappointing finish. So obviously not what I was expecting, not what I had hoped for. But I will say, even though I had an aggressive approach to picking up Fan Championship tickets, we've had countless members reach out to us since the Fan Championship ended, saying that they turned a couple of dollars or a couple $100 into a few $100s or thousands of dollars in this Fan Championship strategy. So just like the ultimate highlight of the satellite strategy in action.
Yeah, absolutely. Because also just think about it. Like, if you played that WFC Fan Championship without those tickets and you spent the $15,000 and instead of minus 36% ROI, you're looking at like minus 60 something. That would be bad.
Yeah, would have been a lot worse for sure.
Yeah. So let's hop over what we talk about on DraftKings here. So it's kind of like messed up the chart because the spike week. 1,500 entries, 50.6K in winnings for a 3.2K% ROI.
Yeah, Jack, is 3,200% ROI good for a single week?
I'm gonna say yeah, it's solid. Yeah, take that.
So this week, normally I play the slant because it has very balanced payouts, but this week they did have the $10 milli, which is the most affordable price point. Normally it's $20 or more. So let me take a shot at this, and end up taking down third place in the big milli. So
yeah, which is awesome. And then if we take a look at how you've done year to date on both sites. 59K in entries, 159K in winnings for a 169% ROI. I would say thumbs up.
So this is great. Yeah, I would say, dude, 169% ROI, just over 100K in total winnings. You know what, Moose? If I just cut out the first 4 weeks of NFL and just solely play NFL Classic, I'll probably make a pretty good life.
Yeah, I would say so. What's up, Willie? Bismo's in here. Said his internet's out, but he's in here talking. Come on, Biz. Huh. But no, what's up, Willie? What's up, Ken? Lingby, BK fan. Everyone that's in here, what's up? Again, guys, if you have questions, definitely go ahead and ask. This is more about pick Brian and Jack's brain, whether it's about how to play a short slate optimally, how to stack properly, how to do 20 max, 50, 150 max, etc., stuff like that. If you had questions about what the field did, about what other pros did, again, this is the time to ask. Cool. So we don't have a chart to show. Hashtag Bismo. So how do you want to take this, Brian? Do you want to go back to talk about Jack's short slate lineup?
Yeah, I think let's bring Jack in the mix here. And Moose, as you bring the lineup up, or I don't know if there's a better way to do this, but we could talk about it at least. So this was the 2-game slate from Saturday. Jack, can you walk us through, first of all, picking the contest that you wanted to play, and then 2, kind of your strategy once you realized what contest you were going to enter?
Yeah, so I love the single game like you do, and on very rare occasions we decide that there's one that just doesn't look good, and honestly I didn't like either of them that much on Saturday. My preference normally would have been to play one, but I thought, since I didn't like either of them, I thought with this one, field ownership would be pretty concentrated among some of those fan favorites, and it just seemed like probably the best slate of the day to play. So that's kind of how I decided to play it. And then, as far as building lineups, the first thing I did was take the page out of the Occupy book. So I don't know if those of you watching played on the Thanksgiving slate at all, but in the plug, they wrote about, specifically in 2-game slates, how there's tons of leverage playing 4x1 and 4x2 stacks. So the field almost never does it. And those lineups are more likely to finish very, very highly. So they're more likely to lose, but when they do well, they're more likely to win than if you just use like a double or a triple. So that was really the core of my strategy. I didn't do all quad stacks, but I tried to get as many of them as I could. And obviously, as you see here, that's what ended up winning. I mean, it must be cool for you to have written that and then seen it pan out just a few weeks later.
Dude, it's pretty sick. Yeah, I gotta say, we talked about it. We even talked about it in the Wednesday stream right before Thanksgiving. Then we wrote about it. And yeah, it's incredible. Moose, I don't know. Can you zoom in at all on the lineup a little bit?
Yeah. So what I'm gonna do instead, actually, is I'm gonna get rid of our faces, and I'm gonna make this a little bit more full screen. That little sweet transition there.
Oh, that's a really sweet transition. You got paid extra for that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Shout out Google. Cool. So. Yeah, so you had Josh Allen, Devin Singletary, Cole Beasley, Stephon Diggs on Buffalo side, ran it back with MG3 and Noah Fant. So take me through that process there. What made you pick the Buffalo Denver stack?
Yeah, so I mean, to keep harping on the plug, I kind of follow the advice, which is you play all the stacks. So I did play all stacks. I even played some Drew Lock. I did not quad stack Drew Lock. I'm not that crazy, but I did play him. But I played a lot of quad stacks for the favorites, just thinking that they're more likely to score more points. So it makes more sense that you could get there with that type of lineup. So I had a bunch of Allen quad stacks, and this just happened to be the right combination. And as you can see, there's no low owned crazy players on this lineup at all. It's very chalky Buffalo players. It's just that not many people played all of them in the same lineup.
I gotta say, Jack, we talked about it before. We both hated the idea of Melvin Gordon and Cole Beasley at their ownerships, but again, like the fact that you hated them at their ownership, you're still gonna get some exposure to them. But if you got exposure to them, it's in a leverage stack and not just playing them as one-offs or as part of a stack that everybody's gonna play.
That's exactly right. And again gets back to your point of like, you don't ask yourself, who do I play? You can let the field decide who you play. I'm like, hey, I hate Cole Beasley, but he's going to be 50% owned. I have to play him. But like you said, you can play him in a way that if he does well, you're leveraged.
Yeah. Moose, I think this is a good question, and I'll direct it to Jack first. Jalen's in the chat. What's up, Jalen? So Jack, in single game contests, what are the 2 to 3 main things that you look for to determine if it's a good slate for you? Preach. You don't have to play every slate, and you and I talk ahead of every slate about whether or not this is a good one or not. So, like, what are some of the things that you look for? Yeah, so I can at least take it for FanDuel, and I'm curious, you probably have some particular things you look for on DraftKings, but at least on the FanDuel side for single game, the biggest thing is heavily concentrated captain ownership. So most of the time that's going to be if there's like a star quarterback or even better, a star running back in the slate, that's going to just immediately garner a ton of ownership. And then you look and say, are there ways this player can fail? And a lot of times the answer is yes. So that's really the big one. And the second big one is there value on the slate? Are there injuries? Is there COVID? Are there, mispriced starters? Are there ways you can build lineups that, can get unique either by, using very low owned guys that are going to do well or just getting way under the salary cap? I think like an example of a tough slate usually is like if you've played any of the Seattle or Minnesota slates, those are usually really tough because like exactly who's going to play. And there's not a lot of value, but like you look at some of these NFC East games where there's all kinds of injuries and weird players playing. Those are just we love. That's why we play.
Yeah, definitely. Brian, do you have anything to add to that question?
No, I think it makes a ton of sense, especially on FanDuel. Like DraftKings, you can always talk yourself into playing the showdown slate, whether it's playing low-owned captains or finding value, or thinking of ways to differentiate. And maybe I don't have as much self-control as Jack does, but like there are most slates I'm gonna
not.
most slates. I mean, DraftKings. I think you can find a way to play it. FanDuel is definitely trickier with the 5 spots in the scoring. So
yeah, definitely. And then we have another question. Oh, not a question, but from Ed. What's up, Ed? He says 50K. Screw 50K. I'd rather have 3 444 tickets. So congrats, Ed. He says you guys are awesome, and I've learned a lot. Thank you, Ed. That's awesome. Now just turn those tickets into cash this time, and then you'll be soaring.
hell yeah, dude. So for those of you watching this, Moose, I don't know if you want to bring our faces back for a little bit as we talk. But yeah, so Ed was playing the EPE contest on FanDuel, the experienced players excluded, which if you have that capability, you should be hammering every single one of those contests until you're no longer allowed to play them, because they're, I'm not gonna say they're free money, but it's the easiest money in DFS to play those contests. Half the time they don't fill. And if they do fill, they're filled with players who don't have experience badges. So Ed picked up a satellite ticket that was like, I don't know, maybe 50% filled. Picked up 3 of them, 3 444 tickets, which is pretty massive to anyone's bankroll. So congrats, Ed, and good work using the strategy to pick the right contest.
Yeah, absolutely. I will say, if you're just starting out or you still have the ability to play those EPE contests, only play those until you can't.
Yeah, dude, definitely.
And then Ken says to Brian, has your opinion soured on 3-1 stacking and GPPs since the Hurt stack was only 2-1?
Yeah, good question, Ken. And Jack, I'm going to bounce some ideas off you here too. I mean, we've gotten this question a lot lately, as seemingly some of the biggest contests have been taken down by not just 2x1 stacks, but just 2x0 stacks. We've seen like a Derek Carr, Darren Waller, no bring back. We've seen obviously some Kyler and some Jalen Hurts stacks. My lineup was a Jalen Hurts lineup. So I think the key here, obviously 3x1 stacking is still the way to go in most contest types for most quarterbacks. But as we have an influx of rushing quarterbacks, we look at Kyler Murray, we look at Lamar Jackson, we look at now Jalen Hurts. These guys, they can get there pretty heavily with their legs, but they still have to throw the ball at some point. And if they're scoring well, that means someone's still going to bring it back. So for me, I still do like half of my rushing quarterbacks with 3-1 stacks and the other half with just 2-1 stacks. Jack, what are your thoughts on now like rushing quarterbacks and modifying the 3-1 strategy a bit?
Same brain, man. That's what I pretty much go 50-50. I guess, you certainly can win with a non-run back, a 2x0, and you certainly can win with a 2x1 with any quarterback, right? But the reason we use those is the correlation. It's more likely that the opposing players will do well if that stack does well. So it just gives you an edge. Instead of randomly picking any player in your player pool to fill that spot, you're picking a player that has slightly more likely to do well, if you're base stack. But I'm with you. I mean, I think playing 2x1s with rushing quarterbacks is definitely legit. And I think that's what you did, right? When we get to yours. Yeah.
Yeah. So mine was a 2x1 with Greg Ward and running back Andrew Hopkins. And the other thing to consider here, and a lot of people are thinking like, what is winning? They're looking at the winning lineups and not thinking about the base rates that we always like to look at. 2x1 rushing quarterbacks is the equivalent of 3x1 stacking with a non-rushing quarterback, in the sense that the field doesn't play it often enough, right? If a field plays a Jalen Hurts lineup, half the time they're doing like literally 1-0 stacks. They're just playing naked Jalen Hurts. Then the other half, maybe they'll bring back 1, or maybe they'll stack them with 1. But the point is, your stack, if you get that extra layer of stacking, even if it's a 2x1 versus a 2x0, you're way above the field, and the correlation justifies the fact that you should be doing that more often. So I understand it. I know a lot of people are going to say I should only play 2x1 stacks now, but that's really only reserved for quarterbacks with the most rushing upside.
Yeah, you pretty much hit it on the nail there. Let's see here. If we have any questions here. Yeah, Willie says, I've never played FanDuel. The website layout was weird to me, so I decided no. Is it easy to import lineups? Yep, very easy to import lineups. If you use DFS Magic or any lineup builder, you'll have a CSV file, and you just import CSV like normal, just like DraftKings.
Yeah, just a little bit different, but similar concept. And again, if you don't have an account on FanDuel, you should go take advantage of the EP contest. Even after you finish in the beginner contest, just withdraw your money, that's fine. But go take advantage of those.
Yeah. And Dot Bets asks, any particular trends you guys have noticed in NFL for these last few weeks? Some teams are motivated, some teams already clinched. Not sure if there's a certain way you guys attack these last few weeks. I assume just trust the model still, but digging deeper if you guys had any experience. Jack, do you have anything to add to that?
I do. So the last 2 nights of Showdown have been frustrating. I played a bunch of Giants against the Browns, and they just got, destroyed. And then last night I was like, all right, I'm just going to play the favorite to try to make those lineups unique, and then look at Cincinnati, wins, and they had a Cincinnati player's optimal captain on both sides. So I think my trend, and I'm going to see if it pans out, when you play Showdown with divisional rematches, you've probably read that, Brian and Moose talk about, generally lower scoring games, teams know each other better. I'm going to take it a little bit further and say it's just a game where literally anything can happen. Like, if you've got a 9-2 against a 2-10, and it's a random non-divisional game, my hypothesis is it's more likely the outcome of that game. But if it's a divisional rematch game, play it like anything can happen. I think there's been a couple cases of that already this year, and that's going to be my I guess that's not really a trend yet, but I'm expecting or hoping to see it over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, and I'll add to that. Like, that's just another layer of reasoning why we look to stack non-divisional games in December, right? Obviously, you have the familiarity with the opponent. You have the wider range of outcomes, which isn't necessarily a good thing in this sense as far as projecting players. And in Week 16, we'll still have a lot of players and a lot of teams and stacks that aren't divisionally matched up. But once we get to Week 17, not only do we have almost nearly all divisional matchups, we also have teams now resting players, motivations, contracts to look into. So like Week 17 for me, Moose, it's just as bad ROI wise for me as it is weeks 1 through 4. Mm-hmm. And maybe I should cut back my allocation a bit. I probably won't, but there's reasons to not play it as heavily as weeks, say 5 through 16.
Yeah, you guys both hit it right on the nail there. So great question, bets. Bismuth says, you say correlation, but a lot of the wide receivers on the same team are negatively correlated. Anyone want to tackle that?
Yeah, so his example is Hopkins and Kirk. And I think this is a nice little transition into the GPP theory that we unveiled a few weeks ago in the cheap stack piece theory. And Jack, I'll kick it to you in a second. But if you're playing expensive stack pieces, part of the trouble there is not only can you not fit in other good players in your lineup outside of the stack, but a lot of times it's really tough for 2 expensive players to go off in a stack, even if the quarterback is going off for what, just because of their salary and how much offense there is to go around. So guys like Kirk and Hopkins definitely, especially if Kyler gets locked in on Hopkins like he did on Sunday. But adding in that cheap piece where they only have to outperform their expectations a little bit to be an option in a winning GPP lineup, that makes it much more likely that a triple stack, a 3x1 stack will go off if one of those guys is cheaper, because even though there might be slightly negatively correlated, the ceiling that they have to hit at a cheaper price tag is way easier to attain than it would be if you're playing 2 of the top dogs in an offense.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Brian. And also, one other thing is, it's a lot easier, or maybe not a lot, but it is easier, I think, in my opinion, that a cheap correlated wide receiver has a better chance of doing well with everyone else versus just a lone island play that you play, the 3K punt wide receiver that has to do well without anyone else doing well in that stack.
Right. So a quick example, Jack, I'll ask you, I'll let you expand on this because when you looked at my lineup, you said that's something we'd probably never hand build, right? We'd probably never put in Greg Ward into a lineup like that. But if you're thinking Greg Ward versus Michael Gallup, roughly similar price. I think Greg Ward was 3K on DraftKings. Michael Gallup was 3.5K. In a vacuum, Michael Gallup's a better player. Many more targets, more air yards, more opportunity in the Dallas offense. But in the context of a lineup, Greg Ward is much more likely to go off in an Eagles game stack in an environment that we already think is going to be high scoring, as opposed to a Cowboys-San Francisco game, than Gallup would outside. So if I'm going to use a cheap player in my lineup, it might as well be a part of an environment, Jack, that I think is already going to be high scoring. And because if that's the case, every person potentially benefits from that high scoring scenario.
Yeah, I mean, it gets back to, the reason we pick players in stacks is it's the correlation, right? So if Hurts doesn't do well, it doesn't matter who you had in that lineup. It's done. If Hurts does well, it's more likely that Greg Ward does well than a random other 3K receiver in another game, right? So, and that's why you would do it. I'm curious. I know you do a lot of hand inspection on your lineup. Do you know if you looked at that one ahead of time or no?
I did because I was making a lot of swaps pre-lock with Tony Pollard news. But this was part of this was a custom stack I had. I wanted some portion, I think I had 2 lineups of 2x1 Hurt stacks with Hopkins and Greg Ward. Like that was literally a custom rule I made. And I think I've said it on here before. Like I'm a huge perfectionist when it comes to my stacking. And I do custom stacks for almost every single stack that I choose. So I did 2x1 stacks with Hopkins and Rager, 2x1 stacks with Goddard and Hopkins, 2x1 stacks with Ward and Hopkins. So I did want that type of stack in my lineup. It was intentional.
Yeah,
it's beautiful.
That's
Thanks,
awesome.
nice.
And I'm gonna go ahead and full screen it, Brian, while you talk about the other part of your lineup. So if we go ahead, I'm gonna pull the lineup here. Oh, that's the wrong lineup. And I'll go full screen on the lineup. And there you go. So you had Hurts and so you had Hurts and Ward, and you ran it back with Hopkins. But then tell me about why you picked the other players that you did.
Yeah, so Ridley was actually top of our model. And I knew he would have a lower ownership despite being without Julio Jones in a really likely high-scoring game environment. So I had to get, and he wasn't an underperforming receiver, wasn't a stack piece. So I had to have dedication to get him into my lineup. So I wanted him in at least like 7 to 10% of my lineups, at least match the field. Emmanuel Sanders was too cheap with Michael Thomas out, so I obviously had a good amount of him in and outside of stacks. The big thing, Jack, we should talk about is Tony Pollard, which if Ezekiel Elliott was ruled out on Tuesday, Pollard would have been 70, 80%, maybe higher on FanDuel at his price tag. But we got the little bit later news. He was only 12% in the milli. But, Jack, this is why we talk about backup running backs being thrust into roles. Sure, we'll get some times where DeAndre Washington or whoever the hell scores 5 points, Mike Davis. But many times we're looking at – this was a ceiling performance, but many times we'll get that fire emoji next to a backup running back at his price.
Yeah, and again, that's such a big component is just paying attention to the inactives list. If you do that, you're beating some really large percentage of the field because they just don't look at this. Moose, what was you were telling us, was it last night a couple of the showdown ownerships for inactive players? Was it like the kicker and someone else? I forget.
It was so nuts. So Randy Bullock was 2.5% owned in large GPPs last. Connor was in between 0.8 and 1.5. Like inactive ownerships, generally speaking, on a slate that makes up about 2% of ownership on FanDuel. I don't know what it is on DraftKings, but I imagine it's around the same thing as that, which is just absolutely nuts.
And these errors increase the smaller the buy-in, the weaker the field. So like in a relatively casual and I would say soft, like the Millionaire Maker field, obviously it's large and a terrible bankroll builder, but the field itself is soft, where you get a lot of casual money in there. And you see it in the Sunday Million on FanDuel as well. People, they $10, $5 a chance at $300K or $1 million or whatever. So Tony Pollard had really low ownership compared to the Fan Championship, compared to the $1,500. Just skyrocketed ownership in those contests for people who are paying attention. And again, that's always a telltale sign that this was a sharp play. If his ownership was higher, the higher the buy-in level. So, and Jack, we see that in FanDuel Showdown too, although I think there's definitely some conversations about what is sharp and what is not in FanDuel Showdown, especially in small field contests.
We gotta get them off their kicker addiction. Other than that, but I mean, think about that, guys. Like Tony Pollard in this contest, let me pull up, was it 12%? He was like 40% in the Fan Championship, or 38 or something. I mean, that four times ownership, because it's literally just people said, "Oh, that's an inactive player. I'm gonna," right. And I think the reason this is even maybe better than something like DeAndre Washington is because we've actually seen Pollard like play. Like he's actually looks like a good player too, right? Positive, maybe positive game strip too. So all the right reasons there.
Yep.
And Brian, I just want to look back. I looked back at it, and for Randy Bullock, and one contest yesterday, the Spike, which is a single entry contest, he was 3.3%.
Not even gonna suit up, get on the field.
Yeah.
Nope. That's crazy.
The rush, he was 2.9. The snap, 2.5. The the one that had the least amount of ownership. I mean, he was even 1% owned in the Monster.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Which is nuts. All right, cool. So Bismo sent over the Spike Week chart, so I do want to just show that really quick.
It's always fun to see.
Yep, I'm showing back our faces.
Hey, Brian, can I ask you one more question about the lineup while he's pulling that up?
Yeah, let's
I don't know if people noticed, but there was not a secondary stack in that lineup. But I know you've talked about that you don't really prioritize that. Do you want to just talk for a minute about, obviously we added that tool to the builder. People like to talk about it, but do you just want to talk about why that's not a priority for you compared to other things?
Yeah, it's a really good question. And for me, it comes down to I'm also particular about getting a random distribution of players throughout my stacks. So if I only have 7% Calvin Ridley, I don't want to end up with all those Calvin Ridley lineups to have like also Mike Evans or Leonard Fournette or Chris Godwin or Antonio Brown, just in case the game stack doesn't go off or whatever. I only want my lineup. It has enough risk already with a massive game stack. I only want my lineup to depend on one game stack and just get the random distribution of good players mixed in throughout it. And of course, I'll end up with some secondary stacks that way, but I don't want to depend on that. And I know it's a good thing. And if you're making a smaller subset of lineups, yeah, that's probably a good idea. If you're playing a smaller contest, it's a really good idea. But for me personally, the priority is number one, game stack, and then two, that high randomizer setting in DFS Magic to get that mix of players around the stacks.
Yeah, cool. So I have your Spike Week chart up here, Brian, from Bismo, and yeah, you can see that spike. This is your third spike for the season. As you talked about before, the first 4 weeks of the NFL season, you just suck.
I gotta stop playing them. I can't physically do it, but I have to stop playing the first 4 weeks.
Yeah, just play like a single entry contest. You'll be fine.
Yeah, seriously.
Question here from Ed says, Brian, I had one entry in the WFFC. I've been burned by tinkering. With one entry, would you have always swapped to Pollard or just leave your entry with Pollard news an hour before lock?
Yeah, man. I think in that sense, especially with uncertainty, and you did have us at your disposal. We put in the plug that he's a near lock. We tried to answer some questions in Discord about him being a near lock. For me personally, I would jam him in and rearrange my lineup, even if it means I already felt really comfortable before, because a lot of people felt that way. Jack, I don't know how many. I mean, at least me is like I felt so good about my lineups because it was a big weekend for me. I had tons of entries, tons of high dollar stuff. I worked on most of my stuff Saturday. I was like, there's not even that much news. I'll be straight. By 10 a.m., I was good to go. I was sitting back, just eating my breakfast. I don't have to tweak anything. And then all of a fucking sudden, Zeke Elliott's rolled out 11:30, and now I have to change 300 perfect lineups, or at least in my mind, perfect lineups. So even though it's uncomfortable, we know it's the right move, Jack, and we have to make it.
Yeah, I mean, just think about you're costing yourself money to not do it. It's like, yes, I have to spend effort grinding with my mouse for 45 minutes, but the alternative is like I'm lighting money on fire because you're passing up a huge edge that's been handed to you. And like we just said, most people are being lazy about it. They're not even checking, or they're checking, and they're making a lazy swap. Like they're just picking a guy at the same price without giving it much thought, right? That type of thing. So, but hey, man, I would level and say it's really hard to choose one lineup. I mean, Brian and I try to do some single entry stuff, and it's way more fun. I think it's way easier, frankly, to build a lot just because you don't miss out on guys, right? When you have one or two lineups, you're like, oh crap, what if I don't play that guy, right? It's really hard. So I don't think there's ever any easy answer to that question, but yeah, Pollard was a great play.
And I think the tying together here is, the people on Twitter who say I would win too if I had 150 lineups. It's like, no, you probably wouldn't, just because it's a much different strategy. But I would say, at least for us, it's easier to win, or at least win big, having a bunch of lineups because of the way we think. But if you're playing just one or two lineups, that's why you really need to play the 100-player leagues and the really small GPPs. Mm-hmm. Having just one lineup and trying to hit big on, a single entry GPP of 5,000 people is really, really tough, and it's going to take you nearly a lifetime to find a true ROI. So grind the 100-player leagues if you're making just a handful of lineups. Grind the satellite tickets, and hopefully you can hit a big satellite ticket to hit some cash to get to that next bankroll tier, or to expand your game, or get a little more serious about it. Because if you're playing just single entry, one entry into really large contests, like You're burning money, and the plays you miss out on aren't as important in those smaller contests because the scores are so much lower needed to win.
Yeah, you hit that on the spot there, Brian. Ed says that my swap of Pollard would have left me with 1,300 left over, and I was in love with Jones' human resources. He's the only person non-correlated I could have swapped. And Brian, my question to you is, when you found out that news, I'm curious, because what I did was I just basically scratched my entire lineups. I rebuilt from scratch. Again, not from scratch, but I didn't just hard swap Pollard in with whoever I needed to. So what would your strategy be there? Would you just auto swap, or would you rebuild kind of completely?
The correct answer is to rebuild. That's number one, the correct answer. Especially with 90 minutes, I think we probably could have made that happen. Mm-hmm. But I got to admit, Jack, I was so in love with my lineups. And the one piece I wasn't that thrilled with was Leonard Fournette. He was a good play at 4,500 on DraftKings, with 5,500 on FanDuel, but we still weren't sure about his role. He could have very easily been a 2-down running back and get phased out of the game and score 2 points, and I wasn't that thrilled with that idea. So I got to admit, I was a little lazy, and I didn't want to ruin the rest of at least my perfect lineups. I just direct swapped out all of my Leonard Fournette as much as I could for Tony Pollard on both sites. And then that obviously that only took a couple seconds. And then afterwards, I said, okay, for the next 85 minutes, where can I fit in Pollard elsewhere? So that was my approach. It was probably suboptimal, but at least for me, there was a reason behind doing that kind of swap.
Yeah, to bring in the lineup builder, one thing you can do in that situation is if you have this access to the Slate groups, right? You just copy your existing one and then rebuild it with Pollard. And like, if you hate them, your other stuff's not lost, right? Then you can be like, all right, I don't like this. I'm going to go back and do some manual swaps, right? So there's some options there. I was with Moose. I just rebuilt. And it actually worked out really well. Because like you said, Fournette was similar price. So it used a lot of him.
Yeah. How much did you end up with, by the way, if you remember, of Pollard on Sunday?
I think it was right around 40 in that fan championship. So right with the field. I don't know. I think that's what you were at too, right?
Yeah, roughly. And again, if I had more time, I would have lock buttoned him for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, to bring back to ownership, right? Like you said, Fournette was a good play too, but we knew that Fournette's ownership was going to be way higher. So that by default makes Pollard, really attractive.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we're about 7 minutes past our normal stream time. We'll stay for a couple more minutes in case anyone else has any last-minute questions. So if you do, go ahead and get them out. We already answered Biz's question. As I had Akers, Henry, Kamara in every lineup, with the assumption of those three dominating, it was hard to come off for Pollard.
It is. That's tough. Those are three really, 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 really good plays. For me, I probably would have come off Akers just because it's Sean McVay, and like even though Akers had been dominating, there was definitely a chance that all of a sudden Malcolm Brown got like 15 touches. So that would have been the way I would have gone. I probably even would have gotten off Henry in that regard, but I don't know. It's a tough spot, but when you have that slam dunk of value, you have to take it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Hey Moose, before we get off, I did want to spend a minute talking about the late swap on mine, because I think, with the short slates coming up for the members, Saturday and then also playoffs, I think it's a really important point to hammer home that the value of doing it.
Okay.
Let's hear it because Jack, this is not the first late swap discussion you and I have had.
No. So if you can pull up the lineup again. So for everyone, this I noticed this lineup was at the top of it was like top 100 lineup at the end of the first game, and I was like looking at it. It had Devontae Adams in it. So you're like, wait, why would I ever swap out Devontae Adams, right? So the first thing I noticed was, even though I was top 100, I was tied with 150 people. So right off the bat, it's like, okay, I'm going to have to get different here, right? I've made it this far, but it's almost like a new contest. It's almost like a 3-man contest, or, it's a lineup with 3 players in it type of contest against 150 people. And I talked to Brian about it, and, I was kind of already there, but he definitely encouraged me. I got to get rid of Adams in this lineup because everyone's going to play him. And so, real
quick, of course, I encourage you to not play the best player on the board. Like that's very on brand for me.
Yeah, exactly. Right. But sure enough, I made this swap that you see to Moore and Jones and Green Bay, and only two other people had this. I almost played Curtis Samuel, and that would have been a two-way, but it didn't win. But I just want to encourage everyone. If you play the short slates in the playoffs Saturday, and you see a lineup that's at the top, really spend a couple minutes looking at it and look at how many people you're tied with, look at how many people are ahead of you, and you have an opportunity. You can say, okay, I'm going to just play the best, highest owned players, and I'm okay with more of a tie, or I'm going to take a really high risk approach and try to get unique, and I'll probably lose, but if I win, I can win at unique or very low duplication.
Yeah, and it comes down to your risk tolerance and also how much you invested. If you max entered, like, this is definitely the right move, because you need to play for those. If you're going to max enter often, like, you need ceiling performances to be profitable, and so you have to make a swap like this. If this somehow you ignored all of our advice and you entered this one lineup into the biggest contest on the board, yeah, keep the chalky lineup, and if you split and you get $4,000. That's ridiculous for $5 or whatever the hell the entry fee was. So yeah, that's fine. So just keep that in mind when you're doing it. Jack, on last year's Thanksgiving slate, you swapped off Michael Thomas, one of the most popular players on the slate, and then in the playoff slate a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago, you swapped on to Mitch Trubisky and Allen Robinson off of, I think, a more popular stack. So this isn't the first time you've done it.
I've made lots of money swapping. I made $70,000 swapping off of Devontae Adams and Michael Thomas. Just think about that sentence.
Yeah, there you go.
And
So
Brian,
it's
go ahead.
good. No, it's fine.
I was gonna say also, Brian, not in these big GPPs, but also in these 100-player leagues. If your first thought is, all right, this lineup I'm putting in is kind of chalky, but I still think it's there, and somehow you're getting crushed or anything like that, and hey, I got, for example, let's say Devontae Adams, Zeke, any popular player, and you're like 20 points down. All right, I got to swap off this popular player in a 100-player league because I'm either going to lose because everyone else above me has him. So that's also a place you can swap. That's even in just regular slates.
Yeah, absolutely, and even vice versa. Let's just say you're in first or second in a 100-player league after the first or second game, and you have 2 spots left, and you're using 2 lower-owned players. There's no need to do that anymore because you're already ahead of the field. Mm-hmm. So just swap to the chalkier options, lock in the best expectation, and make the field take the lower-owned approach and get by you. And if they do, they do. But, this is big in NBA, obviously with late swap and stuff. It's also big in these multi-day and all-day type of slates. So I don't know if we have time, maybe a couple of minutes if you guys have it. But, yeah. Jack, I'm just wondering, this early 3-game slate ahead of us, any changes to approach for 3-game versus 2-game? Or if you've looked at this slate yet, what people can take away from it?
Oh, I've looked at it. Yeah, I think you think my opinion is a 3-game. You can play it a little more straight up. Like, you can build real stacks and you don't have to end up with wacky. I probably wouldn't play. I don't think I'm going to play any 4x2 stacks in a 3-game slate. I might, maybe a couple, but what are your thoughts there? The leverage you looked at, was that specific to 2-gamers or was that also for 3s?
Yeah, it was 2 and 3 game, but the leverage is still there, but it's also like a lower percentage, right? Like, let's just random numbers here. Let's say 4x1 or 4x2 stacks win 20% of the time on 2-game slates, and the field only does it 10% of the time. On a 3-game slate, those numbers drop to like 5% by the field and 10% optimal. So definitely less chance of it hitting. Still leverage, but definitely less chance.
Cool.
Yeah, that makes sense. What are your thoughts on Friday?
Oh man. I'm gonna put a YouTube video out for it. We'll have, obviously there's no Thursday game, so we'll do the Thursday plug for the Friday Christmas slate. But I think we both agree that the Friday showdown slate is going to be fantastic. Just lots of leverage opportunities based on 2 popular running backs and recent performances by their quarterbacks.
Yeah, it should be interesting. I've always had success playing like these Minnesota, I don't know. I love Minnesota as a team. And I always seem to get lucky. I always pick the right player for some reason. So it should be fun. Ken, are we? Well, I don't know if you can captain Taysom Hill. That'll be your thing.
Jack, is that the leverage you were talking about? MVP Taysom Hill on FanDuel?
It is not. It's absolutely not.
So
that's probably gonna win. So
Oh yeah, absolutely. So I think that'll
That's
pretty
a
much
breeze
wrap
through
it up. Jack, do you have any last words you want to say before I take us out of here?
I don't, man. Thanks for having me.
Anytime. Brian, do you have any last words?
No, just wherever you're watching this, follow us, subscribe. OccupyFantasy.com daily plugs going to continue to be out. Again, if this is your first time watching, or if you watched a couple, the NFL season's winding down. But once the season's over, go back and watch all these videos. We talk about a lot of good stuff. I mean, the stuff we give away in here for free is literally stuff that has taken us years to figure out. And hours and hours and hours and hours of research and many, many dollars lost trying to figure it out to get to this point. And we're giving it away for free. You just have to put in the effort to go take notes, listen to it, and implement it. And we're always here for questions. Believe me, and I think I speak for Moose and Jack when I say this, we would prefer a high-level strategy question about your process, about building lineups, about approaching a slate, 1 billion times more than you asking us which player to play on a slate. So,
Yes.
if you have those questions, we welcome them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't spend 20 hours a week grinding FanDuel data to just for nothing. So, yeah, that's fun. So Brian, Jack, thank you all for joining us. We might do a stream tomorrow for NBA. I got to talk to the NBA writers, see what's going on there. But we will have the NBA plug out, NBA model. Saturday, I'll be back with Brian to break down NFL.
Nope, not NBA. Not with me.
Yeah, you just be like, all right, what's on the
That'd be entertaining, huh?
Yeah. Talk about picking players. Yeah, I'm just looking at the model.
Absolutely, yeah.
LeBron James?
He sounds like a good player.
That?
Yeah, so again, Saturday and then Tuesday again, we'll be back at it. NFL model will be up late tomorrow. Until then, next time from Occupy Fantasy, Moose, Brian, and Jack. Peace out.
See you guys.